our meetings.
Yeah.
Bugle, won't we?
Culpepper coming or just? not
Just
here?
text him. I hadn't heard from him.
Well, I'd say we might as well go ahead and get started.
Whenever you're-
Everybody's here except Culpepper. He's the only one we're missing.
And John is listening virtually, so
Okay.
anytime if you've got questions or need him,
All
he
right.
can be called, so.
You ready, Justin?
Live.
Do what?
I just say to do something.
Oh, you didn't see him out there? All right, let's go ahead. Anybody want to excuse him or just go ahead and get cranked up? I don't know.
Can we excuse him
He'll be here.
in the middle of the meeting or something? Because he might.
I don't think we have any choice to
Oh.
either excuse him or
Mr.
just
Mayor, if I may,
get
there's
started.
Mr. Culpepper now, if I may take this.
Oh.
Hey, David.
Yes, I'm trying to get there. I'm there.
Perfect, I'll let the council know, thank you. All right, no problem, bye-bye. Said you'd be here in 3 to 4 minutes, so.
Oh, we can go ahead and start though. So we need the Pledge of Allegiance, so just get started tonight.
Get started
Okay.
tonight.
Barbara, we'll let you off the
Off
hook
the hook.
tonight. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have one item of business, and that's to discuss the proposed budget for the coming year. So, Madam Manager, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Doster.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. As always, it's a pleasure to be able to propose to the Town Council and the citizens of Franklin the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. And we'd like to spend some time tonight going over it. I won't bore you too terribly bad and read detail to detail. Just going to kind of hit some high notes in the message. And then we will take some time and go department by department. And at any time during the process, if you have any questions, just stop and we'll be glad to address it. So with that, in your budget notebooks, if we can go to the tab that suggests proposed budget, and we're going to go to page 1 of the town manager's message. And just to kind of start, I think it's critical to kind of brief the board on kind of some of the issues and uncertainties that we're facing. The global pandemic known as COVID-19 will have lasting consequences throughout fiscal year 2020-21. Sales tax revenue will certainly be affected. It is estimated that at least 80% of sales tax revenues derive from non-essential goods. The North Carolina League of Municipalities is anticipating that municipalities and counties could see at least a 25% reduction in sales tax revenues for fiscal year 2021. Water and sewer revenues will also be affected due to COVID-19 and North Carolina Executive Order 124. Executive Order 124 prohibits public utilities from disconnecting residential utilities due to non-payment. Public utilities cannot bill or collect any fees, charge penalties, or interest from the date of the Executive Order 124. And Executive Order 124 also stipulates that customers shall have the right to make reasonable payment arrangements and have up to 6 months to pay towards utility balance. Currently, Ms. Doster and I have pulled to see how revenue is being affected, and currently we're down 40% decline in monthly utility revenues. So therefore, the town should continue to plan for unexpected revenue loss at the state and federal level. This budget does allot $30,000 in contingency for any unnecessary or unexpected revenue loss or expenditures. And to kind of highlight what your general fund is looking like, at the close of fiscal year 2018-2019, the available fund balance as a percentage of expenditures of general fund was 78%. This is an increase of 15% since the close of fiscal year 2017-2018. The town of Franklin has a very healthy fund balance, and it's because of the due diligence and guidance of this council that we're able to have that. So even though we're facing some uncertain times, the town's in a great financial position if we need to rely on fund balance.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any idea if people who are unable to pay their water bills, for example, are they ever going to be able to catch up, or are we going to be in the position of having to write things off?
That's the concern. With the Executive Order 124, with that 6-month extension, one of the concerns is people may not be able to pay that bill. And therefore, after 2 and 3 months, it starts to add up to a couple hundred, $300, $400, $500. So there is a concern there that you may have to look at that lost revenue at the end of the fiscal year.
That's what I was afraid of. Another, on the same note, I know the stores have only been open for a few days, or, some of the stores. Has anyone gotten any feel for whether people are going back shopping?
Yeah, well, the ones that I've talked to over the weekend that were opening Saturday, basically they all said that it was a whole lot easier to shut down than it was to reopen. And they're all the ones that I talked to that are reopening, they're in a real bind. Pure and simple. We had a virtual mayor's meeting of all the mayors in Region A today, and this whole area is down. And I don't know if later on maybe we'll bring up this $800,000 that the county's getting. And some of that's supposed to come to the municipalities, but the counties don't have to give the municipalities anything of that from the CARES Act. Well, if we got time, we'll mention it in
Sure,
reply.
absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
That could help some of these merchants.
So based on current estimated general fund revenues are projected at $4,371,435. This is a decrease in expenditures of $150,648 from fiscal year 2019-2020. And then this budget also includes appropriation in general fund of $450,000 in Powellville, and it asks and recommends for a one-time modest appropriation from fund balance of $272,408. When Ms. Doster and I started the budget process this year, we've tried to trim it as lean as we can get it, based on some expenditures and some requests that were not out of line at all. We were over $525,000 when we started this process. So with that, therefore, you'll note as well, and we'll move to that in personnel, we weren't able to afford a COLA for the employees due to just trying to maintain as is and provide the best services we can in a cost-effective manner to the citizens of Franklin. This budget, though, however, does recommend holding our current tax rate for ad valorem property tax, and that's 32 cents per $100 evaluation. So current tax rate is recommended for this upcoming year. For personnel, this budget allots for a performance-based payment. So when we start going through some of the salary and wages, you'll see a slight increase in some, and that's a one-time merit increase based on that employee's evaluation. It's not tied to their base salary. It's treated as a bonus. And it's a one-time payment, and it is scheduled to be divvied out at December of 2020. And then again, as we reiterated earlier, this budget does not call for a COLA for fiscal year 2021. Life insurance premiums are expected to remain at current budgeted rates. The town's health insurance is expected to increase 6%. When we first went into the budget process, we were facing an 11% increase. This is a 6%, so we were able to negotiate with med costs to get those costs down. This would be at no expense to the employee. This is a cost the employer would have to dissolve, is the 6%. And we are recommending to stay with the current plan. We did go out to bid for this. We received bids from United Healthcare and Blue Cross, and they were coming back with a 20% increase.
So, Summer, could I ask if do we cover family members, or do they pay that, individuals pay the cost of spouses or children on the insurance plan?
So we do a contribution to that. And Travis, do you have what those rates are really quick?
For spouse, the employees pay $245 a pay period. The town pays the rest. For dependents, as in your children, it's $130 or $113 a pay period. The employee pays the rest. And for family coverage, it's $375 a pay period, and the town pays the rest.
Is that going to remain the same, or is that going to go up?
That'll remain the same.
Are benefits changing to get that reduced, to get it down from that original number to 6%?
No, sir. No, everything, we're currently at a 90-10 plan with Blue Cross, or excuse me, with MedCost.
Well, good job on doing that.
Yeah.
So
That's really
These-
good.
So Travis,
Yes, sir.
you say the town pays the rest.
Mhm.
Is the town paying as much as the worker or?
So it's broken down by percentage. Kyra, do you happen to have those percentages in the email?
I mean, are we matching it dollar for dollar or
No.
not really?
To my knowledge, based on prior, the employee is actually paying the higher percentage of that.
They get their own for part of the.
Yes, so
But for the spouse or the family, they pay most of it.
Yes,
The
sir.
town
that's
keeps
correct. Mhm.
Well, do most of our employees take advantage of that, or do they have spouses that are working and have their own insurance, or do you know if?
We have very few that take advantage of our family plan just because that is rather expensive on the employee side. We do have a pretty large amount that has at least employee spouse or employee child. Okay. Our dental insurance is projected to increase by 2.5%. That's through the league, North Carolina League as well. And then our property and workers' compensation premiums are expected to increase by 5%, and that's with travelers. As far as new positions, this budget calls for one new part-time position, and it's budgeted in the streets department for fiscal year 2021. There are currently 2 part-time positions and 3 full-time positions, and we're hoping by allowing this 3rd position as a part-time, it will be able to almost divide into 2 crews where you can have a mowing crew and a true sidewalk crew. But it's much more cost effective for the town council and taxpayers to do it as a part-time salary versus trying to tackle on all the benefits. Economic development, and I must make a note on this. In the actual budget that you have before you, there's 10,000 in there. I need to correct my message. My message says 5,000, but there is 10,000 budgeted in the governing board's economic development. This is at the discretion of council how you wish to use that, but there is some money in that line item. Other professional services, the budget allots $20,000 for a peer support position in partnership with Macon County, and this is accounted for in the governing board's budget as well. And this is part of the partnership we entered into a few months ago with Macon County, and we're just renewing that commitment for the new budget year. Also in other professional services, some of the needs include Public Works needs to perform utility software upgrades for Badger Meter and South Data. And the total cost for both utility upgrades is $12,270. The wastewater treatment plan is budgeted $21,000, and this includes a headworks analysis, pre-treatment annual report, and pre-treatment permit fees. And this is required by the state, and we do that every 4 years. So this happened to fall in the 4th year mark. Any questions on other professional services? Capital projects. Your big capital projects are derived from the CIP plan that you heard last week. So based in conjunction with the water and sewer CIP plan for fiscal year 2021, the following capital projects are allotted in water and sewer. It would be replacement of 200 water meters. The cost of that is $40,000. Sloan Street and Rolling Hills sewer line replacement, that's at $500,000. And Crane Circle and Lakeside sewer dry line replacement is at $500,000. And those 2 right there are crucial with the development of the proposed new hospital and Scenic Ridge. Any questions on capital projects? Okay. Capital outlay equipment needs for the town. The IT department needs to update and replace 2 servers. The first server that needs to be replaced is at Franklin Police Department, and the second one is here at Town Hall. We have a rotation, and the life expectancy of those servers are 5 to 6 years, and we're on our 6th year now. So this budget allots $43,000 to replace 2 servers. One item of note that's different this year is this budget allots $6,200 for safety glass to be installed at the front window at Town Hall. So one thing we've noticed during the COVID-19 crisis is, unfortunately, with the design of our front window, we've had to keep that window closed based on how close that contact is. And then also, for security reasons, you do have your cash drawer there. So one thing we thought that we should look at, that COVID-19 kind of spurred the interest in, was looking at putting a glass front there to where it's open to the public can see us, and we can accept payments without having to knock on the window for us to open. Mr. Setzer's really worked hard on this. He's worked with Franklin Glass and got a couple other estimates. And to do this right and the correct, we estimated a little high, but you're looking at about $6,200. That'd be for installation and all. Wastewater, sorry, yes ma'am.
Is that like a bulletproof glass? Or is it just, I mean, what's the
Technically bullet resistant.
bullet resistant?
Yeah. Let's just stop at 9mm.
Well, I saw it said safety, and I was just curious
Good question.
about that. I think that's good to,
That current glass is frosted, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, that's why.
Yeah. Next item, under capital outlay equipment, the wastewater treatment plant needs to purchase a conversion kit for converting belt drive and an aerator. The total cost is $13,127. Any other questions on capital outlay equipment? And I'm just kind of highlighting these so that way when we get in each department's budget, when you see some large expenditures, you've kind of got some background as to why. Capital outlay improvements. Funds have been budgeted to rebuild, but not alter, the gazebo downtown. So we've worked with some groups, getting some estimates, and of course we need to take this to the Macon County Commissioners as well to get their approval. But we're looking at budgeting $8,000 to at least put some new boards up, do a new paint job. We've currently got the approval from the county commissioners, and we're working on putting a new roof on there with cedar shakes. So the goal by the end of the new budget year for 2021 is to have the gazebo in a nice operable manner. The second thing in capital outlay improvements, I know Ms. Mashburn and Ms. McRae, we've worked with Tony Angel on these. We finished the banner projects, and I know Mr. Setzer's been adamant as well about looking at addressing some of our wayfinding signage. The current wayfinding signage is over 10 years old, and it's a product of the Main Street program. Some of the businesses listed, they're outdated or they've moved. So this is just an attempt to start phasing in some wayfinding signage, and so $10,000's been allotted for that.
Would that replace the maroon signs you see with gold arrows on them?
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say a special emphasis should be placed on the arrow image, because those signs are nice around town, but from a distance, the arrow, you actually can't see which way it's pointing. I've always noticed that when I see those signs. So in the markup, just make sure the arrow is noticeable from a pretty good distance as to which way it's pointing.
That's a good point, thank you.
Tony's pretty good about keeping everything kind of on track when we've worked with him about things, so.
Funds have also been budgeted for sidewalk repair. So here are the proposed sidewalks, and these are derived directly from the CIP plan that was presented to council Monday night. The first one would be Phillip Street, which is Panther Drive to Waya Street. The current ranking is poor, and it would be 615 linear feet. The second would be West Palmer Street, which is Commerce Street to West Main Street, and the current ranking is poor, and it's 560 linear feet. East Palmer Street, which would be South Patton Avenue to East Main Street, and the current ranking is poor and is 300 linear feet. The next two, I know Ms. McRae has expressed an interest in the Lyman Fields property, particularly up there with Whitmire property, and or I should say project, Lyman Fields project, and on First Street. So since budget was a little tight this year, in order to show the town's commitment to this, we thought it would be a great investment on the town to look at replacing some sidewalk in that area on First Street. It would also be the town's first attempt at trying to do some residential sidewalk. So that may show our investment and commitment as well. And it would be done in 2 phases, which first would be from Highlands Road to Van Rott Street, and the current ranking is 610 linear feet. And then First Street, which is Old Cap Creek Road to Cherry Street, and the current ranking is poor, and it's 930 linear feet. So those are the proposed sidewalk projects for this upcoming year. We did have a delay. Phillip Street would have been done this year, but due to COVID-19 and limited restrictions, I don't know that we'll be able to complete it, so we went ahead and moved that in to complete in the new budget year. Any questions on capital outlay projects? Yes, sir.
The actual cost of the concrete can come from the POW bill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The bulk of the expenditure with your sidewalks, with the exception of labor, will come from capital.
But we're being really frugal and smart with our POW bill money by doing our sidewalks in-house.
Exactly. Capital outlay vehicles. The police department will be replacing 2 patrol vehicles with over 100,000 miles. The police department requested $91,650. However, due to budget constraints, $70,000 has been allotted in this budget for the purchase of 2 new patrol vehicles. And the reason $70,000 was allotted, Ms. Doster and I looked back, and in fiscal year 2019-2020, we were able to purchase 2 new patrol vehicles for $70,000. So that's one reason why we reduced that back. The water treatment plant will be replacing 1 2001 Chevrolet pickup truck with 161,000 miles, and this budget allots $25,000. Public Works will be replacing a 3500 Chevrolet dump truck. The current truck is a 2003 and has 85,000 miles with over 7,800 hours. And this budget allots $49,000 for the purchase. The big purchase, and I know several of you have been on the board and know the dire need of this, is a street sweeper. So for years we've batted around the idea because they're very expensive. We are looking to replace a 2008 Crosswind sweeper with 21,000 miles and 4,100 hours. The approximate life for a sweeper truck is only between 5 to 8 years. This budget allots $265,000 for the purchase of a new street sweeper. So let's talk about that briefly. After reviewing with our town attorney, it is possible to buy your street sweeper from your POW bill funds. And that would be an appropriate use of POW bill because with the construction and repair of your sidewalks and the street miles, we desperately need a new street sweeper. I know we've batted this for several years. It's a big chunk to take in, but your yearly maintenance cost for at least the past 5 years for that street sweeper is going anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. So we're paying quite a bit in maintenance cost of a street sweeper that's on its last leg. Our goal would be, if we are able to secure a new one, we would surplus and sell the old one. Looking at some current proposals, we may stand to sell it for $20,000 to $30,000. So that could help offset some of that. But this is a possibility, and verifying it with legal and finance. You could buy a street sweeper straight out of your POW bill. Any question on capital outlay vehicles? Okay. Building maintenance, I'm just going to kind of hit some highlights. The fire department, we budgeted $12,000 for their building maintenance. 3 reasons. It's a little elevated this year. They need to make some repairs to the roof at their main station. We've also accounted for some elevated maintenance on the proposed substation. If we get some traction on that, we've built in some coverage there. And then also the Plimo vent repairs are expected to occur in this fiscal year. And so there's $12,000 budgeted in building maintenance.
What is Plimo vent?
It's the exhaust system. So when the fire truck pulls into the bay, it's almost like a ventilation system that goes into the truck.
You hook a hose on the tailpipe and it takes all the carbon monoxide out of the building.
Oh, good. Well, we want that, yeah. Where does it send it?
The next 3 are similar and tied together in that the water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant are looking to install new security gates that are automated. So the water plant desperately needs that due to the restrictions and concerns based on 9/11 for security reasons. And then also the sewer plant, their current gate system, it's not a viable one. It's still a pull system mechanism. So there's 6,000 allotted for the water treatment plant and 10,000 allotted for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade for the new gate system. And then Public Works is looking at repairing a fence at the East Franklin water tank and at their facility for 4,000. Debt service, I'm just going to hit the highlights. So all of your debt service is accounted for and budgeted by general statute. For your general fund, you have $131,400 that's budgeted for debt service principal and interest at $12,342. The final debt service payment for Franklin Fire Department will be paid in by June 30th of 2020. So Franklin Fire Department after June 30th will have no debt service in the new budget year. And there, that leaves the water and sewers debt service principal, and it's budgeted at $845,342, and interest at $160,608. On page 4, if you'll note, I'm not going to go into detail on those, but it goes over the loans, when they were entered into, and the remaining balance on those loans. Any questions on your debt service? Okay. The next is by department, so to kind of highlight some of the requests in the department that we've not covered already. Franklin Fire Department, so based on current estimate, fire tax revenues are projected at $851,239 for fiscal year 2021. This is a decrease in expenditures of $91,999 from fiscal year 2019-2020. And the fire department's current property tax rate of 0.0545 is recommended for this budget year. So no property tax increase in fire.
How do they manage to get the expenditures down so much? Is that interest?
No, and we'll get to that. That's a great question. The big bulk of that is their fund balance that we utilized this year. I think we utilized $20,000 in Viper radios, and then another $20,000 for the purchase of the pumper truck. So that was their big reason they were able to get that down. And then also there was a new vehicle purchase in there as well. That was for $38,000 that went to that pumper truck that's no longer in there. The next item, so current tax rate the same. The biggest thing with the fire department and trying to look at future growth of it with the substation, and Chief Breedlove and the fire department's been great to work with. One way to be able to look at paying for a substation is to hold the $74,000 in debt service that would be rolling off to create a reserve account. And we've done that in this budget. So therefore, in theory, in the next 5 years, the Franklin Fire Department in town of Franklin could pay for a substation without having to look at an increased tax rate based on utilizing that $74,000 that's already existing in their budget, but that bases it off of a cost of no more than $350,000 to $360,000. So that's why you'll notice that that $74,000's been kept in there, but allotted in a reserve account, just in case we make traction this year. That's one way that the town council and Franklin Fire could pay for a substation without a tax increase. And then lastly with that, it also just leaves the current rates, $5 for medical and $12 for fire calls. So water and sewer department, a couple other big projects that are built into our water and sewer line distribution lines. Funds are budgeted in the amount of $127,000 for capital outlay distribution sewer line improvements, and that's Boyd's Pump Station located on Terrell Road. It's budgeted at the $127,000 for replacement. So that'll be the big in-house sewer project we do this year. Funds are also budgeted in the amount of $50,000 for capital outlay distribution water lines, and a new SCADA system for all water tanks and booster stations is budgeted at $50,000. The replacement of a water line located at Sunday Drive is budgeted at $3,000. So those two projects account for the $53,000 in your capital outlay water distribution line. Also, some of the board members who've served on here for a little while, that we budget each year $30,000 in a reserve account for the anticipation of the drainage basins at the water plant to be cleaned out. We cleaned those out about a year, maybe 2 years ago, and so that doesn't need to be done between every 4 and 5 years. But if we start creating a reserve account, it's an easier pill to digest than trying to come up in one budget year with $150,000. Water and sewer rates. So based on current estimates, water and sewer revenue combined are projected at $3,988,961 for fiscal year 2020-21. This is a decrease in expenditures of $39,450 from fiscal year 2019-2020. A modest appropriation from water and sewer retained earnings of $350,968 was recommended. Also, based on the proposal from Withers Ravenel at the last council meeting, in order to maintain our CIP plan and continue to invest in infrastructure in water and sewer for the town of Franklin, based on a 0% growth factor for this year, for 2021, a 3% rate increase is recommended for water and sewer, but it's only will affect base and volume charges. It will not affect tap connection or other miscellaneous charges. Any questions on items by department? Okay. And then in conclusion, the total budget takes into account general fund, the fire department, and water and sewer. So the town of Franklin's total budget for fiscal year 2021 is $9,211,635. Okay. Any questions for we dive a little bit deeper? Okay. On your next page, it's Exhibit A. And that is basically just a snapshot of the total general fund, fire department fund, water and sewer enterprise fund. And you can see that's where it gives you the total of the $9.2 million. Any questions on Exhibit A? Okay. Next is Schedule 1, Page 1. And you can see this is, we've went over some of these at your first budget work session. Those numbers have not changed significantly. One thing to note is your local option sales tax. You may ask, well, Summer Kyrie, you're projecting that it could drop 25% or more. Why didn't we reflect that? One reason why we did not reflect that, we anticipate that, is we try to always overestimate expenditures and underestimate revenues. And by doing that, it allows our sales tax, for instance, we're looking at $650,000. For the past 3 years, we've collected on average around $719,000 to $790,000. So that's what's growing your fund balance as well. So we say that, and the reason you don't see a reduction there is we feel like we've tried to do our due diligence and reflect that. And it's a crystal ball at this point. It could be 50%, no one knows. And in reality, the only way to offset that cost without raising taxes, which we're not proposing to do in this budget, is to dip in your fund balance. PAL bill will be interesting to watch. We are anticipating the $125,000, but again, that could be subject to change too, given the gas tax. But you do have a healthy fund balance with your PAL bill.
How much is healthy?
$700,000. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I drove to Asheville today, and if truckers pay taxes, the state is not in as bad a shape as, oh my gosh.
Okay. Schedule 1, Page 2. This is just other sources of revenue that the town collects. So if you can see at the bottom there, that brings your total anticipated revenue on the general side to the $4,371,435. That's actually a decrease of where we are in current year of $4,522,083. So, any questions so far?
I have a quick one. Your local business registration fee, that is what used to be business licenses.
Yes, sir, and that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
How much has that dropped? I mean, Lowe's and Walmart made a lot of money, tremendous amounts of money. Lowe's even had a Friday sale. Mom and pops businesses were closed. It's my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, that Lowe's pays the same privilege license as the guy with a one-chair barbershop.
That is absolutely correct. Now, 5 years ago, that was not true. It was
That's right.
based off of gross sales tax, sales receipts, if you will. In the town of Franklin, about 5-6 years ago by now, we lost over $30,000 in revenue because of that.
Thank you.
Because of going from graduated to the same?
Yes, sir.
Was that from the state?
State mandated, yes. Where basically, as Mayor Scott was just saying, it puts everybody, Walmart pays $10 and the barber chair that has one chair pays $10 now.
That's a real burr under my saddle right now.
Okay. Any other questions before we go into by department? Okay. The first on Schedule 2, page 1, is the governing board, and just to point out a couple items, the professional services accounting, the $33,500, that is your audit that we do each year. Your other professional services, $20,000 of that is for the peer support specialist partnership that we've been working with Macon County, and then $5,000 for the payroll audit that the town has to complete yearly. You'll note that economic development is $10,000, and then the Franklin Area Chamber of Commerce is $4,000 for fireworks. So in comparison to 1920 budget, we were at 173,000, and we're down, we decreased that to 164,500. Any questions there? Okay, yes ma'am.
And we're probably not going to see the same picking on the square amount either, or we based
No, ma'am.
upon, not sure when we're gonna start.
So if that doesn't get spent on picking on the square, it'll just go back in the general fund, or we'll maybe host some fall
You could.
sessions?
That's exactly right. Or you could use it to maybe get a bigger band.
Bob's got the July 4th blowout band.
That's right.
We are going, if we're reopened, the eclipse will be just tiny. What we're gonna do. We're gonna suspend the ABC rules, the whole 9 yards.
ABC store revenue may be up.
Well,
That's
you're the co-chair. I meant to tell you, you're the co-chair of that.
it's one of the things about COVID, apparently people are spending money on at ABC stores.
Good point.
It's essential business.
Any other questions on governing board? Okay. Next is administration, and the biggest line item there that's different is your capital outlay land. If you'll notice in 1920, that was $180,000. That was where the purchase was for the 196 West Palmer Street, the old Texaco property. So you'll notice that that is not, of course, in there for the 2021 budget. So for 1920, the total budget was $417,038, and it's a decrease of 2021 to $244,396.
What page are you on? I kind of
I'm
lost
sorry.
you.
It's Schedule 2, page 2, and it'll say administration.
I have a quick question. This may be not the right time, but it's on my mind. How much did we have to use of our fund balance to balance last year's budget?
0.
0. Okay. But this year, we are projecting to use fund
You
balance?
probably will. So we always, as anything with fund balance, you never know. That's why, 2 years ago, we were at 235,000, ended up didn't have to use any because of the doing revenues the way that we anticipate. Again, when we looked at this back 1st of March before pre-COVID, if the town in March had continued on track just in March, if we were to close the books March 1st, you would have only needed 85,000 out of fund balance to balance. And I think we had projected using 238,000. However, given you've got another quarter for your sales tax, which is going to be your lowest and normally it's one of your highest, you will probably use fund balance this year. I do not believe it will be the full 238,000. I think now it will be at least 85, probably less.
But last year, what saved us was town hall, that, right? Didn't we use that to balance it or no?
It offset it, yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Good question. Any other questions on this particular one? Okay. Next is Schedule 2, page 3, finance. Couple of things just to bring your attention to. We have built in for some part-time salaries in case anyone wants to contract back, maybe in the near future, if we so desired, financial services, that's available. The other item in there that's a little elevated is the non-capital equipment for $3,300. And Ms. Doster, that's primarily to replace some older, out-of-date computers, correct? So overall, the 1920 finance was at 205,257, and for 2021, we've brought that to 204,957. So it's a decrease. Any questions on this particular one? Okay. Next, Schedule 2, page 4 is tax billing. This one is the one to bring your attention to is tax overpayments and refunds. We always try and build in a little bit just in case if you have that weird scenario to where the town of Franklin does owe a citizen a tax refund, or if they had an overpayment, of course that comes before council. But it's built a line item in your budget to where you have some fall right there to pay those expenses. Several years we don't use it. Couple years we have had to use it. But of course, all those come before town council to approve. And then again there, 1920 budget was at 72,634, and it's slightly elevated to 73,408. Any questions there? Okay, next is Schedule 2, page 5, and that's legal and elections. So professional legal services are projected to remain the same at 63,500. Election expenses, of course, this year's not an election, so you don't have that expense. And then legal advertising is basically all the legal notices that the town does, and we've kept that the same. So for 1920, this budget was 79,876, and it's been reduced for 2021 to 72,500. Any questions there? Okay. Facilities. So facilities, the biggest line item to bring everyone's attention to is to non-capital, the $6,200. This is for the safety glass for the front window. So for 1920, that budget was at $335,305, and it's slightly elevated to $340,968. And the biggest contributing reason is that one-time purchase for the safety glass. Any questions in that line item? Okay. IT, to bring everyone's attention, the biggest one to note is capital outlay equipment. It's at $43,000, and that's for the 2 servers, the one for town hall and the police department. So that's the biggest expenditure there for 2021. In 1920, the budget was $58,150. For 2021, it's projected at $91,160. And again, the biggest cost factor is the replacement of those 2 servers. Any questions there? Okay. Police.
Let me ask you a question before you move on past that. The server that we have here for the town hall, does that cover everything in the town hall, or we have more than one server here?
Mr. Setzer.
We have 5 servers here at Town Hall, and we have 1 at the police department. And the ones here, the one that we're replacing is our main server that gives our IP addresses and handles all of our usernames and all that for the town of Franklin. That's the one that we're going to be replacing. But we have 2 just for finance. We have 1 that just runs our firewall, and then we have another one for the tax software.
Oh, good. That's what I wanted to know.
Thank you. Any other questions on IT? Police Department, Schedule 2, page 8. The biggest item just to bring the board's attention to is the capital outlay vehicle. You can see where for 1920, the vehicles were $69,189, and again, based on the message that we alluded to earlier, we've brought that to $70,000. So the police department for 1920, they were at $1,605,189, and for 2021, they're at $1,644,141. Any questions on that budget? Okay.
Are they gonna be able to get the vehicles? I mean, they came up with that number, so.
They should be able to, and that's looking at them maybe being fitted or not. However, there is probably going to be some wiggle room in their budget, depending on how Chief Harold wants to move forward with the positions, where we have had 2 retirements. So they do have some funding to work with within their existing budget. And then if all else fails and we can't make it work, I'm certainly not opposed to tucking my tail and coming back to town council and asking to take it out of contingency.
You
Yes, sir.
don't budget in the prospect of a trade-in or a sale on the front end, do you?
No, sir.
But we'll get something from some of those old police.
Correct.
surplus
And we will
Plus equipment,
surplus.
You don't get a whole lot for a used.
or- Blues Brothers will buy it.
But you are correct, we
Yeah.
will get some back. Any other questions? Okay. Next is going to be Schedule 2, page 9, and that's the LEO separation. I have spoke with Chief Harrell, and that is something he is committed to the town to look at and work on. I know we talk about this every year, but I do believe he'll be dedicated to, there's no way out of it, but maybe looking at ways to start planning for this a little bit better. As we can tell, for 1920, it was at $52,913. That has increased to $63,686, and that's because we did add, there's a total of 4 officers on there. 1920, there was 2, and this year we've added 2 more. So.
Can you anticipate any retirements?
The Franklin Police Department, there's several, this year none that we're aware of, but with that current department, there's several senior officers that certainly could at any time. Any other questions? Okay. Schedule 2, page 10, streets and maintenance. A couple items just to bring the board's attention to. Memorial Park, $16,200. So a couple of things when we're looking at budget. We've got to replace the floor in there, and the town council was gracious enough last Monday night to allot money from contingency to do so. So that will be covered. So what we would like to do with Memorial Park, we've got quotes to repaint the exterior, and that's at $4,200. Then we've also looking at doing some mulch and some cleaning up maybe some drainage issues that's going on down there. And then what funding, if we have left, we would like to look at Mr. Lewis's suggestion during our strategic planning session about putting some games down there. So we've built for recreation purposes. The next item in this budget to bring the council's attention to is the capital outlay improvements, that $18,000. Again, $8,000 of that's for the gazebo rebuild, and $10,000 is for the wayfinding signage. So that's where that's accounted for. So for the streets department, you're looking at, for 1920, it was $408,420, and for this year, 2021, it's projected at $441,096. And one thing also to note, the increase of that is also partly due to that 3rd part-time position. So you'll notice it was last year we had 2, was $23,612. We added an additional We basically budgeted 15,000 for the 3 individuals, and well, hopefully the new individual that'll be working as well. So that's why it's a little elevated there. Questions on the streets department? Okay. Next is Schedule 2, page 11. That's the POW bill. So POW bill for this year, we're projecting $450,000. And one item to note is there's a capital outlay vehicles in that line item, and that's where we're proposing if the council would like to purchase the street sweeper from. Yes, sir.
Was there some thought about putting that on a multi-year plan?
So we've looked at that. We've looked at several plans on that, even like a lease purchase and a buyout. And every plan we've looked at, long-term, as crazy as this sounds, it would be cheaper for the town to buy it outright up front.
Yeah, you researched that.
Yeah. And you know, we've batted it around for several years, and I was hoping looking at it this year, prices would come down. They just keep going up. But it's a little tricky because when you start reading those details, it almost could get us in a similar situation to fire truck leases a few years ago, where if you don't read fine print, it's more than $1 buyout. So we were extra cautious and found that, and this would have been a similar example to that.
Go with it.
Okay. Any other questions on POW bill? Okay. Schedule 2, page 12. This is planning and economic development. And one thing to note that's a little different this year is your Tourism Development Authority. Auditors have now wanted the town to account for that in general fund in planning and economic development. However, that funding is still restricted, but we have to show that. So that's where you're going to see, when you see TDA for $140,000, that is where they have to be accounted for. It's not funding that the town has the leisure of, unfortunately.
As a result of COVID-19, one thing that is coming up statewide is to see if tourism development funds can be used for infrastructure and for other expenses that municipalities are getting into, because your tourists take a toll on your infrastructure as well. And so I know that a lot of towns across, and counties, Buncombe County particularly, they're about to get $5 million back from their TDA. So I'm just throwing that out for information purposes, that it is out there right now to see if there can be a reallocation of funding from TVA.
Is that something that the TDA can decide to do, or does the state have to decide
I
it?
think the state would have to decide it, because, Joe, we were locked in pretty well where our funds could go when we had an authority, yeah.
That would be good, because investing in the quality of life of the town, making it better for residents, is automatically going to make it better for tourists.
Exactly right.
I mean, yeah, tourists are going to come pretty much no matter. I mean, you invest in the quality of life of the town, they're going to come visit, they're going to come move here.
That's right. And they're gonna walk on our sidewalks.
Then you get residents, not just tourists.
Yep.
That be up to the General Assembly ball?
Yes. Mhm. As far as I know, that's, Jack, Joe, when y'all say that would be where that would come from, it'd have to be a local bill.
Oh, that'd be something we do locally and then try to get the General
Try to
Assembly
get them to
pass.
approve it, absolutely, yes.
It has to be a non-controversial local bill. Get support of your local delegation before they'll consider it in Raleigh.
Mhm.
Can I ask, but like a capital expenditure that would be directly tourist related and not just,
Mm-mm. No, it could be used for infrastructure.
but I mean, is that something that the General Assembly would have to, or is that something that the TDA could do now?
When we voted to have a TDA instead of a commission, we basically got locked into where X% has to go to this, X% has to go to that, and there was no wiggle room. Isn't that right?
I'm not disagreeing. That
Yeah.
sounds
Is it
fine.
all marketing?
So in
Pretty much, yes.
the session bill that Mayor Scott and Councilmember Collins is alluding to is it basically just says strictly for the promotion and marketing of travel and tourism. I mean,
Mhm. And he has something that it'll be coming back to the board maybe later on to see if we can let's see how this COVID-19 plays out with us.
There are other areas of the state, when they had their local room taxes, what we call it, when it got started, written in such a way that they could use part of it for travel and tourism and part of it for infrastructure, but that's in their original legislation.
Yeah.
Most of the legislation is exactly like the one that we have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Again, this goes back to quality of life. If you spend it on infrastructure, given today's society of the internet and Instagram, if people are coming to our town and they're doing awesome stuff and they're posting about it, that's getting more hits than any advertisement that we could ever send out there. I mean, the type of word of mouth marketing you get from having an awesome town is worth way more than a sponsored link somewhere on the internet.
Don't disagree at all. And just for mayor and council to know as well, the TDA, we've not been able to meet because they're a rather large board and we would violate some of the restrictions in place with open meetings and gathering restrictions right now. But for the council to be aware as well, Ms. Doster and I pulled revenues to kind of give an insight of where the TDA is. So we forecasted revenues by month for the last 12 years. The last 4 to 5 years, the TDA generates anywhere from $7,900 to $10,000 a year. Last year, for the month of March, the TDA brought in $10,000. This year, now this was right when COVID was starting in March because there's a 2-month lag, they only brought in right at $4,000. And that was before everything got shut down. So the TDA will end up more than likely using some of their fund balance to balance this year. And they are fortunate enough too, which the town councils held them accountable. And this is a good example for that board of why you don't frivolously spend fund balance, because this is the one year they're gonna need it, so.
Of course, they're not.
Rainy day.
I mean, some of the events that they fund advertising for are not taking place because,
Yeah, that's true. But they do, what do they fund in the way of events?
So their festivals and events budget is right at about $26,000. Everything else goes to marketing.
So if an event doesn't take place, they get billed when that event's over, right? So it's not like they're getting that money and the event doesn't happen and.
So Mr. Henning and I actually talked about this last week because we've never faced this to where an event, which him and I were talking about, we've been lucky to where an event didn't occur. So no, actually how that works is the individual signs a contract between the individual and the TDA, stating how they're going to allocate and use those funds. At the end of their event, they then have to submit a funding report back to the TDA to show where they spent that funding. Now, in this case, due to COVID-19, we've had a couple events that was funded have to cancel, and that'll be an item for discussion at TDA in June. Is, you know, some of those events may have spent some money on advertising, but what they didn't spend, the TDA should be entitled to be refunded that amount that they were divvied out. But good questions. And in closing with this one, you can see that for 1920, we're at 292,000, and we brought that down to 247,521. Schedule 2, page 13, festivals and events. Again, we're still anticipating hopefully having a big July 4th celebration, depending on how the phasing works in the next few weeks. But this budget does plan for July 4th, Pumpkin Fest, Veterans Day, and 2 nights of Winter Wonderland. Again, all that could be subject to change. Also, the free movies that we had been doing, we anticipate trying to start that back up when we can. So all that is still resting in the budget, with hopes we'll be able to at least do some of that this year. But for 1920, we're at 84,155, and this year we're at 84,000 even. Questions about festivals and events? Okay. Schedule 2, page 16 is your debt service, and just to highlight, the fiscal year 1920, Your debt for general was $191,067. This year, your debt service is at $143,742. And a big bulk of that is due to Encode software rolling off. And then, of course, you have $30,000 in contingency again this year. You'll note that last year, the 1920, you were at $27,624, and I believe that's because an appropriation was made from contingency when we balanced as of March 17th. So, in closing for general fund, this closes general fund. Last year, $4,522,083. Proposed for 2021, $4,371,435. Do we want to pause there and turn it over for questions on general, or would you prefer that we keep going?
It's up to the board. Any questions? Keep rolling.
Okay. Next is going to be Schedule 3, Page 1, and this is your fire department. Again, fire tax revenue is based on, we did end up saying we got $100 more than what we got from the county, so that's up $100. That's a good thing. But total for this year anticipated revenue is $851,239. And some of you may ask, why is revenue last year $943,238? If you'll note, your fund balance that was appropriated was $36,738. Unfortunately, you had a couple insurance settlements, and then you had your FEMA grant. So that's your bulk of revenues, of course, we have to show, and then we'll showcase that down in expenditures as well. But the 2021 budget anticipates no fund balance from Franklin Fire using to balance their proposed expenditures.
Is it common to get contributions and donations? Or
So that's a great question, and that is a great effort done by Chief Breedlove and Justin Setzer. We tried something this year, and this was spearheaded by both those gentlemen to send out letters of support to the community. And we were successful, and this year those letters generated $10,600.
Wow, congratulations, Justin.
Yeah. Of course, we didn't budget for that because we could still send the letters out, and no one may not donate this year, but it was well received in the community.
So our Franklin Fire Department will have zero debt after this year.
Yes, sir.
And we're not planning on taking on more debt. We're planning on using $74,000 per year for the next 5 years to pay for the substation towards Cowie Mountain on 441.
That would be management's suggestion to council, and just to keep that in mind each year. And when we get to, and I know Chief's been great to work with, he understands that, but that would be a great tool for this board to use to have that to where you wouldn't have to take on any additional debt. Because in all reality, in the next 5 years, you've already started to see it in this year, their main station will need some attention sooner rather than later. So to have a big debt service payment on a substation just doesn't make a lot of sense when they're already needing to make roof repairs on their main system.
And I think we took ownership of the old Texaco station in the town of Franklin's name. Do we want the Franklin Fire Department to own that in the future?
Certainly be up to the board.
I mean, is it a separate entity? Does it
No,
matter?
it doesn't matter. We were successful though. Mr. Henning and Ms. Doster and Mr. Talent, we did receive confirmation from SunTrust that they are willing to accept splitting those parcels. So that will save the fire department right at $8,000 in insurance.
Insurance.
But good question. And that's the only other thing I wanted to note, was to highlight that capital outlay reserve, that $74,000. That's exactly why we left that in there.
I have a hard time equating the town of Franklin with the fire. It's a district, the fire district. Some live in town, some don't.
That's what I'm saying.
If we had, you got a piece of land owned by the town of Franklin, I don't think we could just roll it over to the fire department.
But we bought it as the town of Franklin, right?
Correct.
Is the fire department going to own it? Is that part of the plan, or do we want to keep it? Or
No, we just want to make sure they got plenty of room to get in and out of. We want to keep it for use of what we can, but for one is to give them an adequate buffer.
Okay.
So there'll be no problem with access, yeah.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
And that reminds me, I might have slept through it, but did you mention anything about the Texaco property in this, is there anything in this budget for,
What's next?
yes?
That's a great question. So we're actually trying to do, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, Public Works has been down there slowly but steadily trying to start taking that building apart. We can do all that in-house.
Good.
So our goal for this upcoming year, I didn't allot any funding because I think that's what we can do internal with most of it, is to go ahead and get the building down and at least start turning it into some green space. And then, of course, when we get that down, bring it back to council, and if there's, park benches or something you want to see there, I think that's something definitely we've got in budget we could work with. But great question.
On topic but off topic, there's restrooms there. I know this council has wrestled with restroom issues in previous budgets. Is there any thought of keeping that as a public restroom for fire department festivals, barbecue cook-offs, Halloween, that type of thing? Or is it not worth saving the structure at all?
It's a great question, and I hate to say, unfortunately, I've not been in there. And I'm going to call Mr. Setzer. Mr. Setzer, have you been in the building?
Yeah, I've been in the building.
What's your take? I mean, that is a great question. What is your take on the structure of the existing facilities?
None of them bathrooms are nowhere close to being ADA accessible. So if you get it, we'd have to completely redo the whole thing. To me, I think if you were wanting bathrooms, you would be better to just start from scratch. But there's a asbestos.
Yeah, fair enough.
That building has been there so long, it may not meet up to date standards for handicapped accessibility.
Like he's figured that one out, yeah.
Well, is there not gonna be some sort of egress, ingress option with that property too? Isn't that another reason that we bought it? I mean.
Yeah, that's a great question too. And like I said, our goal right now is just to kind of get it cleaned up, and then we'll come back to council in a couple months and kind of get your direction on what you want us to try and do with that piece of property. But yes, that's the primary reason. The secondary reason was, of course, for access to a sewer line we need to address right there. So in closing with fire department, for 1920, the total budget was $943,238, and for 2021, it's $851,239. The next budget will be scheduled for page 1, and that's the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. If you'll note a couple items there, for fiscal year 1920, we proposed used out of retained earnings $438,791. In reality, and Kyra, I'm gonna put you on the spot because we've looked at this a little bit. You will not need nowhere near that amount to balance this year. But as of probably March, and then with COVID hitting, do you remember we were looking at 60,000?
I want to say 60 to 80. I printed a updated budget summary for water sewer. I can kind of take a look.
So while she's finishing there, we'll circle back to this. But you can see for the utility fees as well, that is based on a 3% increase. So you can see why that's elevated. From 1920, it was $3,429,000, and now it's $3,480,000. That includes that 3%. So with your total revenue for 1920, it was at $4,028,411. Proposed for 2021 is at $3,988,961. And she's still. We'll come back. Any other questions on revenue other than the appropriations question that we'll come back to? Okay.
We're still receiving the money from the county for projects like Highlands is as well, based on an old agreement at $39,000.
Yes, sir.
The half of.
So the Macon County, that's a great question, Mr. Horton. That's the $39,000. You'll see it down here as an expenditure line item, or excuse me, you'll see it as well. In that, several decades ago, the town of Franklin and Macon County entered into an interlocal agreement that basically looks at, in exchange for the town taking on the county's leachate from the landfill and some of the sludge that we'll treat and return, or they'll treat for us, they will pay us a half-man salary. For whatever reason, that there was an employee chosen 25 years ago, so that salary is always carried weight through is what we base that on. Ready?
So our revenues right now, we have collected about 85% of our revenues that we've budgeted for the year. So we need to collect about 15% more. So with having our billings, it's just, according to what comes in. And next month, we can take another look at that because we'll have had a full month of COVID and kind of see where we're at.
So Ms. Doster, would you feel comfortable in stating that in theory, by possibly year end, we'll spend anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000
Yeah.
versus the 400 we
I
had?
don't think we'll have to have 400 because we're pretty close with our utility fees. So I think we'll be good.
To move on to, just real quickly, the capital outlay vehicles in this line item, you'll see that slightly elevated. Last year is $23,994. This year is for the dump truck and then also to replace the one at the water plant, a pickup truck. And keep in mind that when we do the water and sewer enterprise fund, this is a combination, like when you see supplies, this is a combination of public works, the water treatment plant, and wastewater treatment plant. So it's all three getting those supplies. Questions on water and sewer?
What are the utilities? Is that electricity?
The utility fees, that's
Uh-huh.
just water and sewer. Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking in expenditures?
Uh-huh.
Electric.
Wow.
Yeah.
Propane?
The public works facility is.
How close is Tacoma Natural Gas to there?
Well, that's something we've been looking at, that at one point, I think there was some discussion from them that they were interested in laying some line down through there. That would be a great possibility.
Because I love it.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Tacoma Natural Gas, apparently we're using a lot of propane right now to burn the sludge or heat the sludge.
Well, partly, so let me back up real quick. So the bulk of why your utilities are so much in this line item is all of your pump stations, okay? All that you, because I mean, there's probably 25 to 30 power bills we get a month. That's one reason. To go back to the propane question, one of the issues that we've had is at our public works facility, that's how it's heated, and that's a rather large building. So one thing where that discussion came in at was, would it be possible you could offset some of that cost by having that access with natural gas for that? But the bulk of why that's so expensive is all of your pump stations. Because they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And they're drawing huge amounts of power.
Obviously. I don't suppose there's such a thing as a solar, I'm into solar, y'all, but a solar pump station. Wouldn't run at night, but.
Any other questions on water and sewer? Okay, well, with that, just to kind of recap what else you have in your notebook, we won't go into detail, but you do have a revenue tab that just goes in to show the council more in a snapshot view of where revenue's coming into the town, both in general, fire, and water sewer. You also have a tab for expenditures. And expenditures is, again, it takes the whole budget we just went through, puts it more in a 2-page document to where you can see where things are being spent out for this proposed upcoming year. The final tab is your supplementary information, and I know one of the biggest questions you as council members get is, okay, we're gonna, if you propose a water and sewer rate increase, what's my water bill gonna be? So if you'll look, we have table, and this is strictly out of the CIP plan for table 5B. You can see current 2020 rates versus year 1 2021. The biggest thing to note on the second page of this, it gives you a breakdown of sample monthly charges. So your average resident who has both water and sewer, their current bill, in theory, and average, is $54.60. So what does that rate increase mean to them? Their bill's going to go from $54.60 to a total of $56.40. So a couple dollars, and I mean, I'm not saying that lightly, but a lot of times when people hear a 3%, they think is that $10, $15, $20, and that's kind of a good thing for council to be aware of what that actually means. And then the final thing in this document is the Consumer Price Index. For the past several years, I've always liked just to bring council's attention to why, we asked for a COLA or cost of living to support that document. This year it did, of course, this is February 2020. Next year's will be interesting to see as well. Unfortunately, given the uncertainty that the town of Franklin's facing and the residents are facing, there was just no feasible way to do a COLA this year for the employees. But with that, the budget process and the day-to-day operations without the town of Franklin employees is not possible. They put a lot of hard work into this budget. They do their due diligence, and they have to get 3 quotes before we even consider putting it into budget. They also look at state contracts and state bids. So they put a lot of work into this, and for that I want to tell them thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the council and mayor for questions, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to be able to hear and present this to you tonight.
First off, I'd like to say this has been a magnificent effort on y'all's part, particularly someone like myself that really doesn't understand any finances at all. You made it pretty clear to me, and so you've done a good job if you do that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any questions around the board?
No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, as the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, and we are doing that now. And so I think given all the uncertainties and having to guess, and I think you've done a really great job. I really appreciate it, and it makes me feel hopeful that we're, thank goodness we have that good fund balance. I think, I hope that people of the town are proud of us for doing that, for the wisdom of doing that, and make sure that we can carry on with good services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Tucker.
Pardon my tardiness, the 5:30 meetings, I guess, are not my thing. So I missed this, but I guess it's probably the biggest issue of the budget is that we are going to appropriate $272,000 from fund balance to balance this budget.
In theory, yes, sir.
But we also did something similar last year, and we ended up being okay.
So correct. So let's go to budget 2 years ago. Again, you're like 218,000. It's what we projected. You ended up not utilizing any fund balance to balance. Again, let's look at current year, 1920. We projected 238,000, and as of March, if you had to shut down, you're only looking at 85,000. So it's just a working document. But that's a great question to show.
And what is our current fund balance?
Oh, right now, it's 78% of expenditures, and that equates to, I'm trying to go back to audit, unrestricted, meaning if you needed to write a check right now, unrestricted is right at about 800,000. Ms. Doster?
Yeah.
So if that came to fruition, we'd still have $528,000 in unrestricted fund balance,
Yes, sir.
which we're predicting is worst case scenario.
Yes, sir.
Oh, could we talk a little bit about doing some lobbying? There's some money coming down the pipeline. I mentioned it just a minute ago. It's $831,000 coming to Macon County of the CARES Act money. A couple of counties, Wake, Mecklenburg, some of those got a flat out $500,000. I don't know how much of that money Franklin and Highlands can get because the legislature left it up to the counties to make the allocation if they so desire to make allocation. The way that we're reading the bill right now, they don't have to release any of those funds to the municipalities. So I would hope that those of you that know the county commissioners real well could kind of speak to them a little bit about, let's see what we can all get together and see what kind of allocation we can get, because we've got a lot of businesses a lot of things that are just absolutely devastated. I'm sorry to say it, but it's almost like the Depression, that must have been, with some of our businesses. So if y'all could, we're, as they say, we're all in this together, but I'll tell you, some people are not into it as much as we are because they are extremely hurting right now.
Bob,
Yes.
do you have a figure in mind, or a percentage in mind, or
That
a
was,
use in mind? Like, what would we, if we got that money, how could we help these people who are suffering?
I don't know. That's what this council could very easily come up with a plan.
Yeah.
That's what we're up here for,
What's the-
is to
what's
see
the
what we
general
might could do.
rationale?
Pardon?
What's the general rationale for the distribution of this amount to the counties in particular?
I heard it today from a newspaper editor. He told me that he was told, I have been trying to find this out, that they thought it would be a lot easier than trying to dole it out to 520 municipalities, to give it all to the county and let the county
And
dole it
what
out.
is the stated purpose for these monies?
I think it's pretty open-ended, Joe, and if you don't spend it, it's got to go back to the feds. By a certain
Is
date,
it-
it has to be spent.
Is it like to make up for the deficiency in sales tax revenues and
That's
other
partially,
revenues?
that's partially what we
It's an
understand
option.
it is,
So
yeah.
that should be the number one thing we're asking for.
If we could just get whatever the loss that we've had in sales tax revenues, occupancy taxes, anything that you could bring us back up to where it was close to what our revenues were last year. And Highlands, I think they're gonna be hurt maybe even more than we are, because in the occupancy tax field, because they really rely on that occupancy tax.
Well, do they
big
not
time.
have any restrictions on how the money can be spent?
I really don't know.
Looks like to
Jack.
me that
I agree.
it should have been said that it's to help cover the costs that you didn't anticipate having to
Yeah.
have because of the workforce and the work that your municipality or county had to put out.
Well, I
I
have
think the
said,
second part of that should have been, if it's not already in there, it should have been to help to restart the economy, because there are a lot of small businesses here in the county and
Exactly.
in this town who may need some additional help to get back up and running. So take care of the expenses that we had to incur and then focus on getting our small businesses back up and running. I think
Exactly.
those are two things that we ought to try to address, and if that means talking to the county about getting them to see that as a priority, I certainly would be willing to do what I can do to help that.
yeah.
Well, is there a legal way, I mean, for us to help, outright help?
Well, everything that I know about it, I have sent the council.
Yeah.
Where are we at on
I-
out-of-pocket expenditure related to this so far?
We're actually faring pretty well. With COVID for general fund, I know the council, we allotted 10,000 out of contingency. I think we've spent maybe $1,500 to $2,000. Fire department, public works, again, was allotted 10,000 out of their retained earnings and fund balance. And they've spent probably anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000. And again, what they don't use will roll back into where it was taken out of. But the town's fared fairly well.
Our big hit's gonna be the lack of revenue.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
When do you get the March sales tax figures?
When do you normally do get
Well,
those cards?
I should be getting one the 15th.
Okay.
Oh,
And
2
this
days.
will be the one that we see a little bit of
The
a difference.
15th of May, and that would be for March,
It would be 3 months back, yes.
3 months back. Is that February or is that?
It'd be March.
Well, let us know how much that is. I mean, I'd like to have a feeling for how much revenue we've lost that we're gonna have to worry about.
Well-
And then if there's some mechanism that would be, I mean, maybe EDC, Economic Development Commission, and most of the small businesses are located in the towns.
That's right.
So, I
And there
don't
were
think,
still many businesses that were not able to get any of the the funding.
Right.
I mean, I
PPP.
know of Main Street businesses that did not get that.
Yeah, an awful lot of them.
They were working on it when it ran out, and,
Do we know how much the county's expected to get?
Yes, $833,000. I can't tell you exactly. You remember that figure? It's 833.
Right at
833,000.
Do you know when that money's
It's in that
available?
email I sent y'all.
yeah, I was
Do we
pulling.
know when that money's gonna be available, or they already have it?
I get the impression it's in the pipeline coming down pretty quickly. Yeah, yeah. The league has been really on top of this, and that's where I've gotten all my information.
Would
It's
you know
been
if
from
someone
the
at the league has talked to the commissioners?
Oh,
group?
not to the commissioners, they have the legislature hard. They lobbied very hard to set up a percentage or something that's across the state equally. They lobbied very hard for that, Barbara, they sure did.
$833,421.
Yeah, and Clay County got, Jackson County got a little more than we did.
Where's that money coming from, Bob?
Feds,
What?
federal CARES thing. Anybody remember what CARES stands for? It's an acronym for something. Rescue, something,
Probably
economic
critical
something.
something in the.
I don't know. I've only had 4 Zoom
Critical
conferences,
economic
telephone
relief.
meetings today. I think people have become afflicted with, since we can't meet in person, they've got to get on something electronic. Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, if I may, to address Ms. McRae's question, what we can do, if we get those revenues in those financial figures before your June meeting, I will send out kind of a snapshot overview to the board. So what you can we'll do a comparison for you, so at least you'll have those numbers, hopefully in the next couple weeks. Just bear with us. We anticipate May 15th. So if we get something before your next council meeting, I'll draft an email and give a comparison.
And Tommy Jenkins might have access to some other figures statewide, or, I mean, something. That
Have a
might-
meeting with him tomorrow.
Okay,
so.
well, ask him. And, you know, would that not be a good mechanism? I mean,
It says you may not use the money to reimburse for revenue losses.
Oh, really?
It's in that. It says treasury guidelines. It has.
What are you playing with your phone at meetings, Donna?
It's Bob's email.
Why would that be the one thing that it's not allowed for?
It says
That's what I thought it
that.
was for, basically, was to
That
help
was-
towns
What's next?
recover.
It's,
We leave that cat.
I have a logistics question.
Yes, sir.
Back to the capital projects, the CIP plan. We're gonna do the Sloan Street, Rolling Hill Sewer, Crane Circle, Lakeside Drive sewer line replacement. Crane Circle is next to the Highland Road, Lakeside Drive is across Main Street, formerly on business. Are we not gonna be tearing up a whole lot of DOT streets getting through with that sewer line?
There is a possibility, because we need to look at putting a trunk line through there.
Okay, so is DOT come back in after that and resurface the street, or resurfacing the street out of that 500,000? How does that work out?
That is a great question. I mean, that'd be something we'd have to look at. I'm assuming if now this is just in theory, I'm assuming if we destroyed it, we'd be expected to repave
I mean,
it.
is that something we should reach out to them and say, hey, we're gonna destroy your street?
but it
I know
does
their
say
budgets,
not to
they have no
reimburse.
money.
Right.
But
And we would before we went.
Okay.
And so with any of these projects,
No.
with being the amount that they are, they would require LGC approval anyways, which of course will require council approval. So these projects, with the exception of the water meters at 40,000, these would come back to council and we would address those concerns as well.
Probably it's the board of the main streets, I'd say.
oh, it's a big bore, right?
Yeah, but it wouldn't tear up the, anyway. They've got it figured how much it's gonna cost and how to get it done.
Kind of where I'm going with this is, if we're gonna tear up the whole road anyway, let's talk to them about sidewalks through there.
Sure, I mean, we can always ask.
Mayor, it stands for the Coronavirus Aid Relief Economic Security Act.
I knew that. I wanted to see if y'all did.
See who could find it first.
Thank you, sir.
It
All right.
does say that money has to be spent by
About
December
December the
30th.
30th, yeah,
It will.
yeah. Well, let's see if we can get some of it. I know that it is a concern with the league. They had wanted some kind of formula to be in place, rather than just here and there. Yes, sir.
It would behoove us, if you're suggesting we try to talk with them at the county.
Mhm.
If we get a good idea, let's spread it around so we'll be on the same page.
Let's do it. No.
I'm not trying to be, you know what I mean?
I know. No,
You
you're
figure out a
exactly-
good communal thing we can pitch.
You're exactly right, and we've got some good people around this table here that would be the ones to lobby for it too, that know the commissioners, and they're in a bind as well. I mean, look at the expenses that the health department's incurring, the EMS. I mean, everybody's in this boat together. I don't think that everybody's in it equal, but we're sure in the same boat with the expenses that are going on. Yes, ma'am.
Just a couple of things I noticed, just to circle back up to, I don't mean to point, Mr. Culpepper's questions. Mr. Henning circled up on a couple of things. So your question back real quick to the fire department. The fire department's not a separate entity, so therefore cannot own town property. The second question about TDA funding, he pulled it up real quick. 2/3 of TDA funds go to marketing and 1/3 can go to tourism-related infrastructure.
Oh, okay. I thought I knew
So
that.
that might be something to look into
Mhm.
Like a bike park or a skate park.
for Bartram Trail downtown
Or
Mhm.
game tables at the community buildings.
or gazebo.
Gazebo, yeah.
That is very legitimate right there. I'd say that I go to the Picking on the Square pretty regularly. I'm real cultured. So I'd say that 50% of the people there are sort of passing through town. And I'd say that the vast majority of people at Picking don't live within the city limits.
Oh, yeah.
So. Okay, anything else from anybody? Mr. Lewis, you look like you got a question.
Water, since we're in phase one now, obviously, do we have any sense on, as far as water and sewer on usage? Or will we have any sort of snapshot on that in the coming days as some of this stuff's opening back up?
We will, as we close the next cycle, which is their bills are due the 15th of each month. An interesting trend we noticed, there were no delinquent commercial accounts. There were primarily just delinquent residential accounts, and I shouldn't even say delinquent because Executive Order 124 say just past due accounts. But it's interesting because our water usage is down, and you would think
Which would have surprised, when you had this discussion weeks ago, which would have surprised me, but then when you think about it, your
People aren't showering.
big users are the ones that are shut
Restaurants
down,
and all
so.
that.
So, but that's a great question. We'll have a little bit more of an update once we wrap up the end of this month. But based on last month, just as far as revenue, down 40%, but great question about usage as well.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, that reminded me of something. When I went through Dillsboro today, they have a sign at the red light there when you get you to turn in. It says, restaurants open for takeout. Please support our local restaurants, or something like that. But I thought for our sign up here, if there was something along
Yeah.
those lines that we could put up, maybe.
We could certainly get a banner made. We've got some funding available in advertising.
Just
to at least put out in our lawn area. I wouldn't care one bit to look at that. I could work with Mr. Angel and get something designed. If the board kind of consensus, I wouldn't care one bit to do that. I think that's a great.
How
Shows
long would
what-
it take to do that though?
Mr. Angel's lead time, maybe a week to 2 weeks
Because
max.
we're now getting back to where the
Yeah.
Yeah.
restaurants.
They might be
Well, you may
open.
just say support local or
So,
something
yeah,
like that.
something
you
like
know.
that.
Yeah,
But the
we
rest
definitely
would be,
On the
Yeah.
corner here.
Well, the majority of them are still gonna be under occupancy restrictions.
yeah, they would
after-
be under that.
So,
I
So
think
that-
they're having such a hard time, and
Yeah.
it's going to be such a loss to the whole community if some of the restaurants don't open up again.
And if I may, I'm sorry, Mr. Horton, what we can do is I can work with Tony on that, and then since Ms. McRae and Ms. Mashburn have kind of been scared to say liaison, but we'll say members involved with that group, I'll send out kind of a proof and we'll kind of go from there with the wording and make sure you two are comfortable with it.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson.
It's not possible or feasible for us to get together as an entire board with the entire county commissioners and Highlands and so forth because of the situation we're in. But I still think we need to communicate with them somehow in order to get on the same page for this money that's been available through the state. So it might be a good idea for the mayor or the board to select a committee of, a few people to meet with counterparts on the county side to see what the situation is and maybe report back to us so that we'll know where we stand and what we might be able to do to get them to help us through this thing.
Let me ask the board, does anybody want to volunteer to do that? We need some volunteers.
This email that you sent out, this does kind of explain a little better, and I saw it come in with the amount, but I hadn't went on and read the other. It says that eligible spending has to be directly related to expenditures incurred to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's like you said, the health department, the EMS and all that, they are going to have, the county's going to have a lot of expense with that. So, and it talks about the personal protective equipment and any expenses that you were incurred for disinfecting places and
So
things.
it's basically disaster relief is what it is.
So I would think we would have to try to see what expenses we incurred
Yeah.
in order to say this is what we had.
I think that's proper and that's right and that's what to do, and I understand that the county has a lot of expenses that we don't necessarily have, but we have some expenses that we've incurred due to this virus, and I think we ought to be able to let them know what those are. And it's not going to be that we're going to get a big chunk of their money because they're going to spend it on the things that they can justify. But I think we ought to at least let them know that we're aware of this and we'd like to see what their plan is on sharing those resources with municipalities. The other thing I'd like to say, and I'll shut up, is here. I worked on a few budgets before, and I can't hardly believe it. I don't have to deal with the school board or social services or the health department or other elected officials. But I can say this, I think the town manager and the staff have done a really good job putting together what looks like to me, and I've been through it pretty good, looks like to me a very realistic budget, trying to look down the road as far as you can under the circumstances. And I appreciate the work on it, and I'd like to pass that along to all you guys.
And hold the line on taxes.
Holding the line on taxes, and everybody will understand there won't be any salary increases because there are a lot of people who don't have any salary at all right now.
Yeah.
And so I think it lets the folks know and the public that we understand what they're going through. And this budget should reflect that, and I think it, to the best of our ability, it does that. I am very, very pleased that we have such a fund balance to help us through this crisis, and that doesn't happen automatically without somebody looking out for the future, and I appreciate them doing that.
Thank you, Jack. That's very kind.
So maybe the 10,000 here and the 10,000 there that you've had to.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
real quick, if I may, and I don't want to speak out of term, but Mr. Mayor, correct me, we've been sitting on these weekly meetings
Right.
for a while now.
Yes.
And I could be wrong, but one of the figures that Macon County suggested today that they had spent to kind of give an idea of where they were was around, don't hold me to this, but around 85 to 90,000 so far. So I'm assuming that's what they would be eligible for. And so it'll be, that could be interesting to see where the rest. And did you have numbers for us? I'm sorry, Kyra.
Well, like in our water sewer, we have our state of emergency lines set up that we set up when this started to put our expenditures out there. And in water sewer, we have like 4,600. In general, we have 2,200. So we have, we have those split out, so we do have those numbers if needed.
About fire.
Fire.
So Jack, is the shoe on the other foot, am I hearing? We were thinking about trying to get some of the 833 that the county was surely gonna spend somehow or another. Now we're gonna have to come together, all the entities, to try to get as much of that 833 as we can.
All we want is what we need to cover our expenses that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
But we've narrowed it down to, it's got to be for COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what
Now
it's
we're
looking
gonna have
like.
to
If you
pull
can't justify it, you
Highlands.
can't ask
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah,
That's what it's looking
so
like.
we're in it together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They depend on the town depends on the county, we all depend on each other.
Mhm.
And we've all had to go through, to varying degrees, different things that we've had to put up with and address. When there's an emergency here, like there was just with the floods and the land and the mudslides and so forth, nobody cared where the city limits was. They were looking what we can do together
Yeah.
to rescue those people and protect our community. And so I think that's working, like you say, Joe, on both sides of the street. I can see that that's a common interest for both the town and the county, and I think they'll be reasonable when it comes to dealing with us on this amount of money. If we can justify, what we need, then I think they'll be reasonable as far as trying to help us through that.
Can I ask, is there anything that we could have done that we would have really liked to do, that would have really helped our response? I mean, we've been really lucky in Macon County because we've only had 3 cases. That doesn't mean we haven't had to prepare. So is there anything that we should be doing that we aren't doing because of the expense and with the opportunity to maybe get some funding to do it, that we could do it? Does that make?
I'm sure.
That's good thinking, and it's
Yeah.
also, it's our expenses up until December, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
we haven't spent a lot of money yet,
Correct.
but there's gonna be more money
There
spent
could be
than
more
what we've
coming, that's
already
right.
spent.
Because it mentions testing.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
Yes, and make sure we build up our reserves to an adequate level of gloves and masks
Yeah,
and stuff.
so those things are in there. So now we've had you work on a budget, now we're saying, go back and see what we
Nothing wrong with that.
spent. And I don't know what the fire department or, extra things that they would have had also, maybe.
600 so far, right?
Is that?
So
okay.
what Ms. Doster and I can do is we can start working on kind of a draft, maybe a memo to council, and we'll back it up with some financial documents to show what we have, we'll say as June 1st, since that's your next council meeting, what we've spent as a whole, and we'll break it down by your 3 funds to kind of give the council something to look at. That also start us a working document to present to the county to show this was our loss so far. But it goes back to what Mr. Culpepper, Mr. Collins said. It would be interesting to see what the next 6 months hold, and it goes true, go ahead and start stocking up on your PPE if we can get it, to charge for those expenditures, because it's not over yet. So that's
Well,
good.
Another thing, you don't ever know where these expenses are gonna come from. Karen Gorby talked this morning on our call. The hospital has lost a ton of money. They're gonna start back, I believe it's this week or next week, doing elective surgery.
They started
haven't
this
done-
week. My aunt had hers
They
yesterday.
have, and their occupancy has been off, what did she say, about 40 or 50%? I understand for a change, you could walk into the emergency room and there was no wait
Oh, I
because
did.
nobody was there.
I was in and out of there in less than an hour. I
Yeah.
threw a rock in my eye from my weed eater and had to go. And I was in and out. By the time I went in to the time I got treated and left, I was less than an hour.
So-
There was nobody in there.
Well, right.
So, you look at the expenses at the hospital. I mean, our police department, I don't know that they've had any direct expense, but the sheriff's department has as well. Manpower to deal with some of this stuff. We had a rash of people wanting to report out of state license plates.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. So, I think y'all got a good plan.
Let me say one
Yes,
other
ma'am.
thing. And I was reading today, and this is certainly something that could come up as a county expense if the legislature doesn't cover it. Did any of y'all read that about the election expenses?
Yeah.
I mean, they're saying that when the next elections, they're gonna give everybody a mask, all the workers poll workers will be wearing masks. Everyone that comes in will be given a mask. They're giving pens to every person so you don't share a pen, putting plexiglass up, and the expense is just going tremendous, and then all the absentee ballots, and it's the legislature, they've got to have not voted on it, so if they don't pick up all that, then the county's gonna have to come back, and so that's like an ongoing, that could be, because they expect to have so many more, that they said just the cost of absentee was it like $2, between $2.50 and $3 a person to mail out with the postage and get it back, and no idea, but it was a huge cost that it could be across the state for that.
We're fortunate that this is not a municipal election year, otherwise
Right.
that would be an
That's right.
expense that we would have to suffer through.
You know, it looks to me like, just from where I sit, that the best thing to do would have been to give the county and the municipalities the pot of money and let them decide where it was needed as a result of lost revenues, rather than somebody somewhere else saying what we could apply for. When it's just like thinking about the hospital. I know it's our profit hospital now, but somebody's going to have to pick up those costs somewhere. Okay, any other questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, can I say something just, I mean.
Too late. No, go ahead.
It's not about
Go
the
ahead,
budget, and it's a very simple thing, but I was coming out of Big Bear, the parking lot down there by the river, and I was sort of taken aback because there was a car backing up on the one-way, it's a one-way street, and he was backing all the way up to the first place where he could turn, and I noticed there's no one-way signs. So if a person is parked down there and has never been there before, and they come out, he turned the wrong way, you're supposed to go north, east, west, and he was going east, coming out of the Greenway at Big Bear.
Oh.
And I bet you that's happened before, because there's no signs at all, so.
Not a budget item, can't take it up tonight, Laura.
It's not a matter of business, I just thought maybe you could tell the.
I thought there used to be,
Can pass, we'll work on that with DOT. I've made a note.
I mean,
Okay,
I'm sorry,
good.
Joe, but I don't want somebody to get killed. Because it's not a budget item.
there's some way we could
Second.
say it was COVID-19 related.
Anyway, so I second your motion.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So sad.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I read somewhere on
Thank you, Ms.
Facebook
Carroll.
where they said if somebody dies
If we decide
and they put
we
the
can't
cause
let
of
you go, we
death
could have
as
had this budget keep going
COVID-19,
another year.
the government pays the hospital $39,000